So how is it that I can plant beans beside carrots and carrots beside leeks, but I can't put beans beside leeks? And now you understand why it feels like calculus and why I hate the concept of companion planting guides. So today I thought I would go on a little bit of a rant on why I hate companion planting. And I'm so tired of seeing it in articles, in seed catalogs, on YouTube here. It is just something that makes me go a little bananas. And I wanted to talk to you today about why I hate it and what I do instead. If you're new here, my name is Bree from Urban Gardening Canada and I garden in Ottawa Zone 5. Companion planting became a lot more popular in the mainstream maybe 5 years ago now. It's been a little while and it's been used for a really long time. For example, the indigenous method of the Three Sisters could be considered a version of companion planting. However, it's really evolved over the last 5 years about attracting nematodes or detracting pests or blah blah blah, like all these different things, and I just like can't stand what it's become. And so I just wanted to share with you all of the things that I hate about it. So the first thing is, if you've ever read a companion planting guide, it literally feels like calculus, especially the ones that come with telling you plant this beside this, but don't plant this beside this. Like, it's just wild. So I have one up here that's a great example. Bush and pole beans can be planted with brassicas, carrots, celery, chard, corn, cucumber, eggplant, peas, potatoes, radish, and strawberries, but avoid planting near chives, garlic, leeks, and onions. And also pole beans and beets stunt each other's growth. So now I have to know, am I planting my pole beans next to my carrots? But if I put my carrots beside my beets, because let's see here. Plant carrots with brassicas, chives, and leeks. Okay, so I can plant my beans beside my carrots and my carrots can be planted beside leeks or onions, but is that too close? Are the leeks or onions too close to the beans that it's gonna cause a problem? So how is it that I can plant beans beside carrots and carrots beside leeks, but I can't put beans beside leeks? And now you understand why it feels like calculus and why I hate the concept of companion planting guides, because who can even come up with this and track every single one of who can and who can't? And we grow in our backyards as smaller gardeners. I only have 100 square feet. So now how far away can my plants be before it's negative? Like, can I even fit them all in one garden, or is it problematic? It's wild. And so this leads me into my second reason that I hate companion planting. And that's because if you're a beginner and you get caught up in a companion planting guide, such as the one I'm reading to you, you are gonna feel so stressed out that you're just not gonna plant a garden. Or I've seen people online who just toss in seeds and just hope for the best, which is totally fine, whatever. If you wanna garden that way, nobody's stopping you, but do not ever get so caught up in these companion planting guides that you just don't start. And that is one of the biggest reasons I hate companion planting, is that if you turn this into, especially for a lot of us millennials whose parents were like, school is important, a degree is important, a diploma is important. We are all like massive researchers. All of us are so used to studying and looking things up and reading documents because that's how we were raised to be, that if you are looking at how to garden and you're doing way too much research and trying to learn absolutely everything you can before you even start a garden, and you fall into a companion planting guide, I think that you'll get so overwhelmed that you're not even going to start a garden. And to me, that's really, really concerning, because if you plant your beans beside your onions or your beans beside your leeks, like maybe something will happen, but maybe it won't. I don't know. So really, it's more important that you start versus getting too caught up in the information. And so this leads me into my third thing that I hate about companion planting, is that it could potentially lead you to think you need to plant things that you don't even want to eat. So again, if you have a really small backyard garden like I do, and you only have so much space, you really, really want to plant the things you're going to eat. And so if they say plant your carrots beside let's see what's on here. Plant your carrots beside rosemary, and you hate rosemary, you're gonna be like, well, I have to plant the rosemary, it's good for the carrots. And you don't eat rosemary, and now you're wasting a couple square feet of your garden for it. And so it's like, you're getting in your head or getting caught up by someone telling you that these work really well together, and they can potentially lead you astray into growing things that you just don't eat. And so this is another reason that you should just grow what you like, plant what you like, and don't worry about this at all. And the final reason that I have a grudge against companion planting is that there actually is not a lot of solid scientific evidence to prove companion planting is legitimate. So you'll read that it repels bugs, brings in nematodes, changes the microorganisms in the soil. Some of this stuff is going to be true, some of it isn't. Some of it is folklore, some of it isn't. And so I don't believe that unless there's scientific evidence to back it that it's wrong, because I believe a lot of certain things when it comes to nutrition are really important to our bodies that maybe science hasn't caught up with. So I'm not saying that without a scientific study it's fake. I'm just saying that there's not a ton of scientific studies out there or solid evidence to prove all of this, which means don't focus your entire garden around companion planting when it's actually not a guarantee to be true. That's really the biggest thing that I'm saying here, is that don't not garden because of companion planting when we can't even guarantee it's actually accurate. And so these are all of my reasons why I absolutely hate companion planting. And so I do want to provide alternatives to you of what I do and what I have found to be true, and maybe some statements that actually support companion planting, because not everything is an absolute. So I want to get into that. But before I do, I did want to mention that I have a course on how to build a stronger garden. It's a self-paced course online that's filled with tons of lectures, workbooks, worksheets, downloadable printouts that you can take with you in your garden, quizzes, videos. It's loaded with all kinds of stuff. So if you are a gardener that's been gardening for anywhere from 3 to 10 years, this is going to be perfect for you, because it covers the entire gardening cycle, from the right seeds to buy all the way to how to save your seeds, with everything in between. So that way you can build a stronger garden that is both going to withstand any type of wild weather that we're going to be getting this year. We've already been seeing tons of thunderstorms, hail, ice, tornadoes, and so this course is going to help build a stronger garden that can withstand the hail or the high winds or the dropping temperatures, raising temperatures, whatever it is. And so you can get a free preview of this course as well. So why not take advantage of getting a couple lectures for free? I'm going to put the link below for you so you can check it out. And now let me tell you what I do in the garden instead. So the number one thing that I do is intercropping. And so it might sound like companion planting, but it isn't, because I don't focus on what can go beside something else. And so the reason that I intercrop is because a couple of reasons is that if you have a space that is all one single plant, which is monoculture, a lot of pests are going to show up because their favorite food is all congregated in one single space. Versus when you're mixing your plants together by planting cucumbers with lettuce and tomatoes, they aren't going to get all of their favorite food in one spot. And so you are going to be able to keep pests away with that specific type of planting structure. The other thing that I do with my intercropping is I include herbs inside of that garden. So this way there is, whether there's evidence or not, there's a potential that herbs and their strong scents can help repel pests by distracting them or confusing them from finding their food. And so the mix of putting different crops together plus the herbs in there can all work together, so that way they don't just find their one favorite food in one spot and have a buffet, but they're gonna have to work a little bit harder in order to get to their favorite food. Another thing that I do is I think about how my garden is set up and how I plan to eat. So for example, if I have a 5x5 garden, on the outside of it, I will plant things like spinach and lettuce that I'm going to be harvesting regularly. And in the center that's a little bit harder to reach, I'm planting my long-term crops such as eggplant or peppers, where they take a long time to mature. You're harvesting them less frequently, and so you can leave them alone in the center and you'll have easy reaching as you harvest around the outside of your garden. So this is the type of planting that I focus on, is more of mixing your crops together, adding in some herbs, and then also planting in a way of how you use your garden and how you harvest it, so that way it's a lot easier for you during the season. And the final thing that I do is I include flowers. So not just marigolds. Again, there's not a lot of studies to prove that marigolds are going to keep pests away from your tomatoes. I plant all kinds of different things. I plant nasturtium, I plant alyssum, dill I'll let go to flower. I have long high marigolds that aren't your typical greenhouse kind. And so the actual reason that I'm planting these flowers isn't to deter pests, but is actually because I'm trying to bring in pollinators. And a lot of these plants are actually self-pollinating. Peppers, eggplants, and tomatoes are truly self-pollinating plants. However, there is research to suggest that fruit and vegetables that have been pollinated by bees have a longer shelf life and taste better. And so I do want to bring these pollinators into my garden to help me pollinate my plants. Plus, I want to support our native pollinators here because they have a collapsing population that I'm really worried about. And so I am trying to make sure that my garden brings in as much biodiversity as possible. And so this is far more important to focus on supporting your biodiversity, bringing in your pollinators, and building a garden that is suitable for how you use it and how you are harvesting out of it, rather than reading some kind of document that says plant this beside this while avoiding this, because it's just too complicated and it doesn't necessarily make sense or work. I have, though, experienced one companion planting setup that they said not to do that I disregarded, and I do think that it's interesting because it allowed me to experiment and see if this is actually true. And that was planting peas beside garlic. So I had garlic in a couple different spots in my garden, and one of them I planted beside the peas, and the peas actually did make my garlic heads smaller. And so I did find that to be a really interesting experiment. I have never looked at what it was about the two that make them not like each other. However, it was interesting. And so for me, because I've experienced this, and I acknowledge that this is actually a situation that happened, I'm just not going to plant peas and garlic near each other. So not a big deal. And so that's kind of more an interesting aspect of it, is just experimenting. And then say something doesn't work out well, you can technically Google it and say, what are the companion plants for this specific plant, and see if maybe that is something that there's some research backed up or an article backing up what's happened to you in your experience. Finally, there is the Three Sisters, which is an indigenous way of planting. And this is where you plant pole beans, corn, and squash together. Let me start with a disclaimer. I'm not super well versed in the Three Sisters as a whole. However, I have a general idea of the concept and why it works. And so instead of it necessarily being a companion planting setup where we're talking about how the roots and the microbes and the nutrients work with each other, what it includes is that the corn is going to grow really tall, and that allows the pole beans to have something to climb up. And while the pole beans are climbing, your squash is growing on the bottom. And because they have big leaves and they grow on a vine, they act as a natural mulch for your garden. And so what this is doing is keeping your soil from drying out. And that's specifically because of the way that the squash plants are growing. And so what's happening with them here is that they are all growing together and supporting one another through being a way to grow tall and have something to climb up it, and a way to have a natural mulch, so that way you're saving water. And so that's really a specific group of three that work well together. So you can really replicate this with sunflowers and peas and squash, and then you can find out if that works. Like, are there different alternatives that have a similar growth structure? And so this is just an interesting way that you can experiment together. And maybe the companion planting guide says don't plant sunflowers and peas together because there's toxins inside the sunflower's roots, which actually is a thing that can cause problems. I don't know with what, because I don't really search it too much, but there are just different things that I want you to learn as a gardener through experimentation, and not learn through reading a guide and deciding what you can and can't plant. So perhaps this was a really bad suggestion to do the sunflowers, peas, and squash. Who knows? But the point is that the only way you should be finding out is by trying it in the garden, experimenting, and finding out if it's a disaster or not, and then adjusting from there. That's really the best way to do it, unless you are literally growing because you have food security and you are in need of this food, then experimentation doesn't quite work the same way because you're trying to grow your staple foods just for calories and nutrition. If that's the case, I do have another video called How to Grow a Survival Garden, and that is very, very much specific on nutrition and calories. So I recommend you checking that video out if you garden for that specific reason. But otherwise, if you are a new gardener or you're gardening for a hobby, then I highly recommend experimenting, failing, killing things, whatever it takes, because that's the best way that you can grow as a gardener and really learn this hobby and everything that you need to know about plants. And otherwise, that is everything for today's video. Let me know in the comments below if I've offended you on anything related to companion planting, if you agree with things, if you disagree with things, what your experience has been. I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in this video here. Bye.